Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we look at what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now today I want to talk about some realism appearing among the politicians in the EU in regards to Russian energy. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has finally acknowledged that the EU has suffered significant economic losses due to the cutting off of its major purchases of Russian energy resources. She has characterised the current situation as critical, emphasising that the EU's competitiveness is contingent on getting back to the days of lower oil and gas prices. However, she has cautioned that the opportunity to purchase energy at favourable rates has been missed, and the reliability of energy supplies to the EU is no longer a given. Of course, cancelling the sanctions on Russia and making peace overtures could change the situation, but virtue signalling, politics and Russophobia are more important to her than taking practical steps. Now, she says that the economy is now facing serious consequences of the policies that may be questionable in their wisdom. You could say that again. She said, exorbitant energy costs are causing households and businesses that are grappling with soaring energy expenses and have yet to settle their bills. She noted a 75% decline in gas imports from Russia, with the current share of Russian oil dropping to around 3% and a complete cessation of use of Russian coal. Now, the outcome of these measures is a decline in the viability of the major industrial sectors, with production levels experience a significant drop. Now, she says it's imperative that we diversify, as she acknowledged that the European Parliament's and the EU's competitiveness is contingent on the return of low and stable energy prices. However, she believes that this can only be achieved by sourcing energy from alternative suppliers. We must diversify our energy sector and expand the use of environmentally friendly sources, including renewables and in some countries nuclear, she said. So the deluded old Russophobic harridan still actually doesn't get it, that reliance on investment in renewables has cost her native Germany hundreds of billions of euros and resulted in some of the highest electricity prices in the world. Plus, as far as diversifying suppliers is concerned, she's managed to alienate Qatar as a supplier and has just become dependent on the unreliable US LNG supplies that were Russia's, just as Russia's were, but at 3 times the cost. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, scobricksinsight.com, to further develop it. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you all now. Now, in the EU, especially Germany, in the energy intensive sectors, the decline is already at 10 to 15%. The chemical and automobile industries are on the verge of bankruptcy, and the transfer of capacities out of the Eurozone to other regions of the world, like Asia and the US, where there are lower energy costs, has become irreversible. I mean, according to Eurostat, in the third quarter of 2024, the industrial production index for the EU as a whole fell to 93.8 from 102.5 in the second quarter of 2022. So now there's a phenomenon of the deindustrialisation of Europe, as was noted by Mario Draghi, the former head of the European Central Bank, in his report EU Competitiveness, a Look Ahead for the European Commission, which is indeed deindustrialisation. Now, the EU has assured that the crisis will be overcome and that Russian energy resources would be replaced, but there are serious difficulties with this rhetoric, as there's no cheaper energy resources available other than Russian on the world market, and the so-called alternatives are much more expensive. Of course, maybe they're relying on unicorn farts like Ed Miliband in the UK. Now, companies continue to suffer from high electricity prices 2 to 3 times higher than in the US, and gas prices 4 to 5 times higher. Now, this discrepancy is primarily attributable to the absence of Europe having its own natural resources, and that's compounded by the underlying economic challenges as been highlighted in Mario Draghi's document. According to the calculations, the EU's expenditure on fossil fuel imports has escalated from 341 billion in 2019 to 470 billion in 2023, and that's approximately 2.7% of their Euro's GDP. This is partly due to a decrease in Russian pipeline supplies from 40% in 2021 to 8% in 2023, and an increase in LNG prices, where it's at least twice as expensive. So as a result, the EU has fallen behind the US and China in competitiveness, and as the former head of the ECB, if energy costs are 4 times higher than the competitors, then EU industries cannot compete. Now, the situation has been further complicated by the cessation of gas transit through the Ukraine. Last year, approximately 15 billion cubic metres entered the EU via this route, and that was 4.5% of the total consumption. So it's evident that Europe is placing excessive reliance on alternative sources. The decarbonisation goal previously outlined by the head of the European Commission will slowly drag down the economy. Says draggy, what a pun. He added that fossil fuels will continue to play a key role in energy until at least the end of the next decade. The Green New Deal plan has not been successful despite their massive investments in the green and renewable energy. Electricity prices in EU countries exceed €200 per megawatt hour. Now, according to Tatiana Skirl, who's a professor at the economic theory at the Plekhanov Russian University of Economics, she says weather conditions, the high cost of infrastructure, its maintenance and depreciation are all major problems with the renewables. So it's therefore not surprising that the EU is currently the leader in purchasing large amounts of Russian liquefied natural gas. According to Rystad Energy, last year they purchased a record 17.8 million tonnes. In 2023 it was 15.1, in 2022 it was 16.4. So the EU's reliance on Russian oil is even more pronounced. Furthermore, sanctions and circumvention strategies have led to significant cost escalations. Europe buys large amounts of Russian oil that is disguised as coming from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates and India, and it then pays a premium for it because of the use of third parties. Consequently, it's unlikely that electricity prices are going to decrease in the EU. Skirl notes that while government subsidies may have offset business expenses, the change in political leadership may hinder such further support. There are contradictions, as observers point out. The EU policy is contrary to common sense, as evidenced by the decline in industrial production and the loss of competitiveness. The EU countries are just becoming a market for American energy resources, which are several times more expensive than Russian. The Eurozone's primary challenges stem from the erosion of its core sovereignty, with numerous heads of state and the EU leadership have been subjected to lobbying and bullying by the US and the transnational companies based overseas, according to Cameron Bekharov, who's a professor of Institute of World Economy and Business at the Russian Higher School of Economics. Now, what's interesting is in a recent speech, which comes 3 years after the beginning of the break in trade relations with Russia, Robert Habeck, the green Russophobe German Minister of Economics, or lack of economics, made a speech at an economic forum of Handelsblatt newspaper. And he said that Eurozone countries should not try to destroy the EU, but start working for their own interest and meet the Trump administration with an outstretched hand, but not to have this hand be chopped off. Now, these remarks were made in the context of the energy crisis that's currently being experienced by all the countries of the EU, characterised by the shortage of energy resources, unaffordable prices for hydrocarbons, and the complete loss of competitiveness. Now, Habeck, in agreement with the head of the Austrian energy company OMV, Alfred Stern, has expressed concerns that the EU is dangerously reliant on liquefied natural gas from the United States, just as it previously was reliant on Russian pipeline gas imports. However, the primary difference is the so-called freedom molecules from the US are 3 times more expensive, and while this may appear to be a familiar situation, it's crucial to recognise that Europe is not facing an end point with this development. Rather, it's a temporary respite before the next phase of challenges it faces. The European Commission's decision to prioritise suppliers from other areas, primarily the US, is a serious concern. The high cost of energy resources, particularly the blue fuel sold by American companies to the EU, is well documented. But the concerns about the stability of the supplies really have not been addressed. I mean, the sharp drop in prices will prompt an immediate reduction in production. And gas, like other fuels, is expected to rise in price, particularly in the light of the decline in the EU's production potential, with Norway, Denmark, etc., and all producing much less gas. So it's understandable the final decision in Europe has been delayed, as there's growing disagreements. While Havoc and Stern were delivering their sombre update from their podiums, in the US, the Freeport LNG liquefaction plant faced a near halt in production due to the impact of the storm and Hurricane Enzo. According to American media reports, the terminal ceased operations on the 21st of January and is scheduled to resume production once its uninterruptible, that's a laugh, isn't it, uninterruptible power supply is restored. So its uninterruptible power supply was lost. Because it's in Texas, a legal domestic offshore zone, the Freeport facility produced up to 15% of all American LNG, and until recently it was a source of pride for its owners and the entire country, as it was the first environmentally friendly production facility of LNG. Electric motors and drives are critical to its liquefaction, compression and pumping processes, and these systems have been affected by the power outages and the shortages over the past week. Now, it's said the enterprise operations will naturally be reinstated, but this serves as another reason for those who prefer to place all their eggs in one basket to actually reconsider their strategy. Do remember, a year ago, American gas carriers were redirecting their cargoes heading to Asia instead of the ports of the European Union because the more attractive pricing in Asia. This shift underscores the strategic importance of the European energy policy and the need for its leaders to address these concerns. They have a comprehensive view of the current situation and are aware of the risks, but they're weighed down by the massive restrictions they've created for themselves. I mean, it's now clear that Europe's now entering a decisive moment in its history. I mean, the US is preoccupied with addressing its domestic and geopolitical challenges, and it's significantly more distant from the issues of the stagnant nation of Europe. Additionally, several sources have reported that the Trump administration has decided to suspend bilateral relations with Brussels for an indefinite period, and instead it's opting to engage directly with individual EU countries. Now, this suggests that concerns about the potential impact of new Washington administration on the cohesion of the European Union may actually have some foundation. I mean, the leaders of the largest European states still have an opportunity to pull their country out of their historical and economic nosedive by starting work for their own country's benefit. I mean, Russia would undoubtedly welcome such a development, perhaps now with the intervention of Habeck and Stern joining the sensible voices of Viktor Orban of Hungary and Robert Fico of Slovakia. Then von der Leyen and the others will move to make it easier to buy Russian fossil fuels before all the industries in the EU disappear. I mean, as reported by Bloomberg, the European Commission is expected to postpone the release of its plan to phase out imports from Russia by 2027, which was scheduled for March the 26th. A group of 10 countries has called for stricter sanctions against Russia, according to Bloomberg, but the consent of all 27 members is required for this decision to be implemented. So given the growing opposition to it, that's unlikely to happen. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. And if you want to help me out, click on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.